Hello and welcome everyone to another exciting episode by the B2B Pod. I have the absolute pleasure to host my guest, Chris Tremaglio. Our episode is about ruthless prioritization and quick wins.
Welcome to the B2B Pod by the Pulse of Dubai with your host, Radwa Hassan, a podcast that touches upon everything that's going on in and around the B2B industry.
Chris Tremaglio is an experienced demand generation marketeer of SaaS, BPO, and consulting services, with roles as a digital strategist, sales, and sales ops. For the past 12 plus years, he has worked in some of the biggest matrix companies in IT. He is an award-winning CMO and a doting parent. Chris won several accolades inside IBM while working in the US and UK and currently lives outside NYC. To keep grounded and to ensure maximum impact, he aims for roles as close to the revenue as possible. Welcome, Chris. Happy to have you here with us for this exciting episode. Our episode is the B2B Marketeers. Are you prioritizing ruthlessly? Very interesting topic. Hello, Chris.
Thanks for having me. I feel the pressure now to be exciting, but thanks for having me.
Your topic is super exciting and really happy to dig in and start on our topic. And so, a quick overview for the topic of the episode is about ruthless prioritization and quick wins, and how marketing professionals in most organizations, especially with the matrix organizations, are under some pressure to prioritize, but also to give attention to the different functions within an organization. So, for example, think about content and programs for customer service, design communications for product development teams, and more. Everything is a priority when it comes to marketing. So, this demands deep industry knowledge and heavy resource commitment. If the organization structure is complex, say, for example, in a matrix organization, the expectation from the marketing team would be also to expand, and all projects become a priority for respective stakeholders. In a B2B matrix organization, marketeers have many portfolio areas to focus on. And I would start with asking Chris, what is your point of view on that ruthless prioritization catch 22 here?
Yeah, I it's such a great question and a great topic because I feel like everybody listening or even if there's just two of you out there, I feel like when I look at this topic, I constantly see communication as key to it. And that brings us to the ruthless prioritization because we don't always feel empowered to tell a senior leader who's got millions upon tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue coming in on a particular product and to tell them that's not a priority, or to break the tie and be junior mid-career and try to break the tie over all these competing priorities. And so the catch 22 I think is really around, well, of course we have to prioritize, but everyone is telling us what is priority. No one is volunteering what isn't. And so how we arrive at what isn't a priority is probably the challenge. And
Yeah.
got plenty of thoughts on it. I made plenty of mistakes. But my first step is always to just surface as much of the work as possible that we have going on and as much of the asks, no matter how senior they come into me, are, so that when I have the opportunity to prioritize and a new thing comes in, I'm really able to kind of respond and say, okay, what comes out? It's a very uncomfortable conversation, and maybe that's a follow up, but it's a very uncomfortable conversation to tell somebody, hey, something else has got to come out and it might not even be yours. So who's having that conversation? It's a real challenge.
It is. And in different situations, you would get escalated uh, for what kind of priority you did not tackle. And really, it becomes a difficult situation.
Yeah. I think the different type of organization that we're in raises different challenges. The one that I'm in currently and the way we work is we're kind of a strategic shared service across a bunch of different business groups. And so we have to live the prioritization or we would be constantly tied up in fire drills and like the shiny thing of the moment. And so the strategy that I've seen work really well, and I actually borrowed it from a former mentor, is to have the highest level stakeholder with all the people who are asking for the work to choose the priorities. What is priority for you? And so, in order to get there, we have to have some idea of all the work we're doing and our capacity. And so, we bring in our capacity and we bring in kind of like a laundry list of what we have going on and what we have planned. And we show it in a very simple, kind of big animal picture type way. And we're like, what are the things? You do it on a graph, you can do it in Excel, you can do it in some of our Radwa Hassan kind of Jira, Trello type things. But what are the
Mhm.
items that you move to the top right corner of a priority list? And the best advice that I've ever gotten, and kind of being able to be a fly on the wall earlier in my career, is if that person is making the decision, then it takes a little bit of pressure on us to determine priority, like you said in your intro, on a topic we don't understand. If I don't
Yeah.
understand how to build out industry specific content for a deep SaaS product, I might not understand all the things that that entails and I might size it wrong. But if the leader determines that that's the highest priority thing and we show them the capacity, we can at least have like an ongoing dialogue about it. And once the dialogue is happening and starts to be like a muscle that we keep using, it gets so much easier.
Yeah, certainly. Of course, getting that level of buy in from the stakeholders is very important. In some situations, the decision by the stakeholder within a group, like if it's a sales executive, if it's a VP, he or she would have team members of a leadership team. A problem is that getting everybody on board. And even if initially everybody becomes like they follow the leader, and they kind of support the point of view or the priority that has been named by that leader. Along the way, if people are not clear on the priorities and what you really need to get rid of and ruthlessly kill, it's just like becomes later on as the elephant in the room. But this is not it. This is not what we want. And skepticism start to rise because they're not deeply convinced, or maybe they're not clear on what the priority is, like because of lack of knowledge or of understanding of the market or in the industry is what really would get us from point A to point B. And in some situations, it's on marketing to maybe educate the different stakeholders or the members in their team about the priorities. So it's tough.
Yeah, I think it raises a good point around, well, how being ruthless in your prioritization is like a kind of a cool tagline, but it's like, how do we actually do it and get people to buy in? And I've been thinking about this in preparation to chat with you. And the place where my head goes first is about having a pretty agreed to criteria about what makes something a priority. And so that'll be a little bit squishy sometimes and won't always be constant, but it should pretty much follow a similar frame. And maybe that frame is an outside in look, like what's the voice of the customer? Do we have any data? Do we have any user testing? Something like that. More internally focused, it could be, is this a future direction of where the company's going? Is this a major launch, a major event that we wouldn't have any data on because it's the first time we're doing it? And then maybe secondly, is this achievable and do we have the items ready or a path to be ready? And so there's some sort of a triangle there where, okay, the if the customer is interested in it, if the business's backing is behind it, and if other groups have already started working against it, well, we have a much clearer idea that this is what the organization is invested in. If we don't have one or two of those items, then it really becomes something where more of the interpersonal, more of a qualitative judgment has to be made of, this is important because X, and we're going to deprioritize something else. But having that framework allows everybody to kind of be operating from the same frame of mind when we go through prioritization. Because if we do ruthless prioritization and people don't have buy-in, they're not actually going to agree with the decisions we made, which kind of lowers morale. It kind of fosters an environment where confusion actually sneaks in subconsciously and also insubordinately sometimes. People are like,
Yeah,
I don't agree. I don't agree that you're not going to support my event. Like the business is asking me for it. I don't agree, but we don't have any data on it. We don't have any content for it. Probably
exactly.
can't
There's
support
no
it.
even interest.
Right.
Yeah, there's no even interest in the market. There are some, and here is to sometimes legacy products, legacy portfolio areas that really there isn't enough interest, but the company is still keeping.
Yeah.
And people are still holding on to that they won't let go, and that's where the ruthless is much needed, and that's where the stakeholder support is also much needed, because they're the ones who should be laying out this and clearly say, no, we're not going this direction, and this is not where our customers are. And
That's where I
that,
see
I
a
think,
stumble here.
yeah,
I know we mentioned earlier that I work at IBM, and where I see big companies like my current, previous friends, colleagues, where I see a stumble is the decisions move horizontally from one organization to the other at like middle or low levels. And so there isn't this clear communication as you described it, that we are moving away from talking about this. We are moving away from supporting this. And generally what happens is it only comes across at a lower level by somebody else who generally shouldn't have to carry that burden of explaining to people this is what we're supporting. And so I'm not always a big fan of top down, but if the organization has chosen a strategic direction, then the organization at a high level has to communicate that, because it shouldn't come down to a Chris or somebody more junior than Chris going and saying, hey, this is what the higher ups decided, and the money's changed and
yeah,
the support structure's changed, because all we've done is really make somebody pretty angry. They're going to escalate. It's going to come back to us anyway. And so the best thing
yeah,
somebody can do as a leader for their people is to communicate that change in direction. It doesn't mean have every detail lined up or outlined, but communicate that change, communicate what it means. And instead of framing it in what people are losing, are we gaining something? Because it's possible we are. And we had something similar in my last few weeks here as we went to the business, we got by, and we'd done a bunch of things, and ultimately when we went to go get it built and get it kind of designed and comped out, we found the team kind of leadership wants to go in a different direction, and it's a
hmm,
huge bummer. It's kind of upsetting everybody on the business side, but the direction they wanted to go in actually was going to give more exposure to the brand and the group of products than we were trying to ourselves. And so it's kind of one of these situations where there might be a silver lining, but we have to
yeah,
communicate that
there you
upper level.
go.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It could be even a more positive thing that gives you better traction and exposure, as you said. So, but here's the thing, sometimes it takes a lot of pushing for people to listen, understand, and get on board with ideas, and sometimes even using external data or research to prove a point, to say, hey, market is going away or moving away from this or going into that direction. So we
The
better
analysts are
follow.
great for that. The
Yeah.
analysts are great for that because as much as, we all have some issues sometimes with, you have to pay to get in a report, you have to submit all this information and, there's all kinds of dubious comments, but where they're really valuable is they're looking across the industry and a bunch of things and hearing opinions from a lot of folks. And so it's a way for a leader or even a mid-level junior person to kind of help couch their why they want to prioritize certain things or the direction that they want to go in or the project that they want to take on in like where the market's going. And so, like if Gartner and Forrester and IDC and some of these big wigs for these big enterprise companies, if they're saying that your website is really too difficult to navigate, we just don't understand your strategy on XYZ, that's tough medicine, but we didn't have to say it. It brings another voice into the communication that helps you kind of have a conversation that might be otherwise uncomfortable. It's
Yeah, yeah, it's just a lot of denial that you have to give in and just like follow certain direction.
This show is brought to you by Logicron, a leading demand generation company. providing solutions and synchronizing all your B2B needs logically.
My other question would be now, sophisticated sometimes equals smart. And in matrix organizations that is already complex, how do you simplify things? How do you simplify campaigns? How do you simplify marketing to make it understood or not overcomplicated?
I don't think I do a good enough job of this, if I'm being honest, because it's like an everyday struggle, right? Whew, it's a great question. I think the topic we're discussing today is prioritization, but like making marketing simple is like really bringing things down to their simplest level. What worked? What didn't work? What suggested optimizations or tests do we want to do next? I mean, just simple. What worked? What didn't work? What do we want to do next? When somebody raises a problem, try to put it in terms of a customer's problem. Customer can't find blank. Customer received no follow up after a request for a demo. And like just keeping things really simple in terms of like what's working, what's not working, what's the customer experiencing. Sounds super cliche, but I find it really powerful to talk about it in that way. And when I mentioned it's a struggle for me, I was even on a planning session the other day, and a new person on my team has a lot of experience in agile marketing. And
Mhm.
agile is difficult sometimes to learn, but it's actually really a breath of fresh air to operate in. And the way he works is he asks the question in a customer tone, and from a customer point of view. And what's really interesting about it is it goes back to prioritization because it helps us figure out if the thing is priority. If the customer is reaching out to us and we're not responding in a particular amount of time, that is a flaming priority because we don't have to do any work to find that customer. We already have that customers in that bucket. They've already gone through all the hoops that we put up where that, to find us. They've searched, they've clicked on ads, they're in the product, they're at stage 2, whatever. That becomes such a huge priority. And so thinking about it in those simple terms, like helps us outline what's really important.
I really like the part about agile marketing because it's an eye opener in some situations. And also, when you factor in the customer in your conversation, in the planning, or even the priorities, you find out sometimes that people do not think about it that way.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a serious blocker
and
buster too. To be able to tell
yeah,
somebody that the customer is experiencing this problem allows you to overcome sometimes the internal mumbo jumbo about, well, we only send emails out to this type of customer. Oh, well, we have a long backlog. We're not going to be able to get to that issue. But it helps you break through those.
absolutely, because they can just debate that part. They cannot. They cannot.
Right.
And then I think that's when people start to listen, because I find that many organizations, they talk about their customer centricity, but to be honest, when it comes to their products, there's level of service, customer service really doesn't match up to any centricity, and it's all about talking about it, but they don't talk the talk and walk the
That's the
walk.
ugly truth. You're right.
Yeah. So now, with the simplification and the ruthless prioritization and trying to make things clear to everyone, how do you see that as part of communications, marketeers can navigate the sales communications with the quick wins and the ruthless prioritization? Just like keeping everybody updated, but also at the same time communicating that clear message on your KPIs, your goals, and not just focusing. Remember when we were talking about this part of you put your effort, your focus on the execution, but sometimes you would just lose that communications bit.
Yeah. I think on your last question I mentioned it's something I wasn't I make mistakes on all the time. I think this one is my own personal largest challenge. And so this isn't, about me in particular, but maybe a lot of other people see themselves in this. I find that the communication and the updating and a lot of the things don't come as natural to me. And I find them a little bit more tedious, especially as I have been changing from an independent contributor to a team leader and a manager. And so that moving from more of a lone wolf or more of a person who delivers their piece, hands it over, and gets onto the next thing, and kind of leading projects that are that go across multiple sprints. I find this communication piece to be the biggest challenge. So I think maybe my advice is catch more in some mistakes I made in the past than it is grand wisdom. But I think there's something so simple about a project plan at whatever
Mhm.
fidelity you can make it. What is the problem you're trying to address in customer terms? Who are the people that need to be involved? What's the major deadline? What types of inputs do you need and who needs to approve it? That kind of project plan brief type thing is so powerful. And I don't even think we realize that in Microsoft Word or in Box, Doc Notes, or all these other kind of tools, just templates exist out there. So if you've never done one, and I found myself in
Right.
this place a few years ago, if you hadn't done one very formally, just pull a template and have at it, because a bad project plan is better than no project plan. And then the first thing I tend to do is I tend to go get buy-in from an ally at my level or different position, same position, different discipline, similar, whatever. Get some feedback on, am I missing something? Now, if you're new to an organization or new to a company, it's the best thing you possibly could do because you might not know the processes, you might not know the approvers, but the simple project plan is absolutely a gap that I've had to address. And from a simple project plan, you can really get to the high level, deep ones, the checklists, everything that you need to execute the project. But it starts with the first step.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, drumming up your internal business, or rather marketing and your campaigns and new initiatives, I think it lessens the skepticism and also creates that very positive interest internally and gets everybody on board with an idea. So it's just like a teaser. And you have
Yeah,
an interesting and a nice teaser about any campaign or an ad that you see, it gets you hyped up about this campaign.
right.
So the more you have a nice teaser, the more you can just like get people's support, especially stakeholders.
I mean, once you
So
get
yeah,
that project plan down, then you can get on to the fun stuff, which is what's a quick win? What's a quick win that you can actually get that has data against it, that has been in front of customers, that is irrefutable? Put a test out, do something, find a similar situation. If it's hard to get a test out in your organization, find a similar situation where that ally or somebody else has done something similar. Just get some excitement. And while you're trying to get that quick win, I think we're in these big hierarchical companies now, or at least a lot of us are, and it feels like the autonomy or the agency is leaving the roles.
mhm.
Anything you couch in a test or a pilot is, and, as long as it's staying within legal and staying within the brand guidelines or whatever those kind of parameters that are always on us, just getting something in front of the customer and getting a quick win is super powerful. Because if the data is in your favor, it helps make the project run stronger. If the data is not, maybe we made a mistake, or maybe the customer, maybe that's not actually the right move, and we've learned something before we've dragged the whole team through a massive project.
True, true. Yeah, and when you're communicating on any campaign and your audience, mostly they're the sales team, communicating with through numbers and facts and proof points is really something that they can understand. And because when you talk, for example, with sales about impressions and engagements, this is like for them something that they cannot relate to very much. You
Yeah.
need to first explain. You tell them, "Oh, well, we put that post and the impressions are like 1,000. So but that's
Is that
so alien
good?
to
Is
them.
that bad?
Yeah. Am I doing good? Am I doing bad? Did I succeed? So it really something that you need to make sure everybody can relate to, whether revenue, leads, or the customer, even like when you're saying customers, we did a survey and this is how many customers are satisfied or dissatisfied. But our marketing jargon, I think, does not really fly by them.
I think the more deeply we go into digital marketing and the tactics, the harder it is for more senior leaders and the harder it is for some of our other disciplines to kind of stay with us. When we're in a small team of people executing, we probably tend to find our people, are kind, that know, that can speak the language. But the more we actually try to sell it up and get buy-in for the project, the further we get from speaking the same language. I totally agree. That's such a great point.
Yeah, yeah. So, Chris, if I ask you to please give our audience a number of takeaways and tips about creating and building quick wins and having that ruthless prioritization spirit, what would be the key tips that you would give them?
I love that question, because it's something I think it's something we have to do all the time. Some of it is a spirit. You said the spirit, and I think sometimes it's okay to be selfish as well. Ruthlessly prioritizing is going to give you more time to focus on what matters to the company and what matters to you. Just because you're ruthlessly prioritizing doesn't mean something that you care about, or a stretch project, or something that you think is going to be great in your own personal portfolio falls out. It does not mean that. And so I think getting to this mindset that you can communicate, you can say no, is not a first step. Always an ethos you want to have. The first step to me is surface all the work you're working on. I try to do this all the time. I had things coming in this morning. I'm in Eastern Standard Time. It's the afternoon. I had things coming in this morning, and I'm just struggling to get them up and visible. But if you get it up and visible, then you are armed with the ability to explain to somebody all the things that you're working on and actually get buy-in for what's priority. So what are the things? Secondly, and I don't have this all planned out in my head, you're gonna have to stay with me, but secondly, I would say find the opportunity to communicate to stakeholders, to have them decide what is priority. If they're arguing about it, that's fine. That's healthy. But us deciding in a silo by ourselves actually makes our life harder, because now we have to explain it 3 times. We have to explain to people they're not happy. So really, it's show everything you're working on, everything that's been requested, and actually raise it up to somebody with the ability to help you decide what is priority. Hold them to that decision.
Yeah.
This is where the business is going. This is where we're putting our media dollars. This is where we've already channel planned the assets. So these 4 things are more important than these 6. They didn't die. We didn't kill them. We may, but they're sitting here in back. They're,
Yes.
they're
Yeah, we
sitting here in
may.
backlog. They're sitting here in backlog. And so it's the first step, I think, is to get people comfortable communicating priorities and what to say no to. It's a lot harder to get people to stop doing something they're used to doing, because this promise that we'll get to it later still keeps them in the game. There may be things that we just are not in our business sense to get to. So show all the work, get a real prioritization meeting going with the people that matter. But as you get that organized, get the criteria of why something is or isn't a priority. Is it based on what the customer is saying, what senior leadership is asking for, where the media or the content money and investment is going? If you can have a kind of a criteria that people agree with, and you can have a prioritization meeting and all the work is there, you're in such a better place. So those are like the tactics that I would do, the things that I would do. But there's no prioritization, I think, is really successful long term without like kind of communication. So we talked earlier about it, like an ally. When you're new to an organization, how helpful they can be. When you're deciding like what the prioritization looks like, get some feedback. Get some feedback of somebody on your team, somebody who sits adjacent to you in the next discipline. Because when they're helping in the room, they're helping when you're not in the room, to make sure that
Yeah.
this kind of prioritization holds, because we're a big organization with a lot of different motivations, and it's not just going to naturally hold because somebody said that's not a priority anymore or this is. Things are going to keep creeping in, so it has to be kind of
Yeah.
regular.
Yeah. Building your advocates and or
Yeah, you really want
having
somebody you can
more
trust.
advocates. Yeah.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
Chris, yeah, really great episode. So happy with all the great discussions and content that you have shared. I think it's very valuable for our listeners. And thank you for your time.
Well, I can't. Thanks for having me. I can't wait to see it out there, and I'm sure somebody's going to say in a comment, what if we're new to the organization? That's something we haven't covered. And that's what's cool about it. There's actually, there's always something. And I think that hopefully these serve as some basics.
Certainly. And I think marketing is not going to slow down. In the near future, marketing has changed forever. And in fact, is going to keep accelerating. Things will continue to change because that's what marketing does best. The most successful marketing teams are those who can embrace the volatility and prioritize ruthlessly.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for listening. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the B2B Pod by the Pulse of Dubai with your host, Radwa Hassan. This show was brought to you by Logicron. If you aren't already, make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Google, or Apple Podcasts. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can visit us on thepodcast.ae and follow us on social media at the B2B Pod. See you next time.